Okay, quick question for you. Where in the world do farmers actually grow rice below sea level? Seriously, think about it. If you're picturing traditional terraced mountains or flat flooded river plains, it is time to completely shatter those boring geography stereotypes. Our planet's landscape is just packed with surprises that force us to adapt in the most unbelievable ways.
Well, it turns out it's in the Kutanad region of Kerala, India. Down there, agricultural life doesn't just scrape by, it absolutely thrives in one of the world's very few below sea level farming zones. We're talking 2 to 3 meters below the sea. So, how do they pull this off? They literally trap seawater behind massive dams and barricades to cultivate their crops, which has totally earned Kutanad the title of Kerala's Rice Bowl. It is just a stunning, brilliant example of human ingenuity going head-to-head with extreme geography.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are absolutely not just staring at a static map. No way. We're going to explore the vast Indian subcontinent as a living, breathing entity. We are diving deep into the biography of a landmass that actively shapes the daily lives of over 1 billion people.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start big with the blueprint, then move right into the anatomy, check out the veins, feel the pulse, explore the living canvas, and finally, look at how humanity is mastering the land.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the blueprint, scale, time, and global footprint.
You've really got to wrap your head around this incredible contrast. India spans roughly 33 lakh square kilometers, which technically makes it the 7th largest country on the planet. But get this, that is only about 2.4% of the Earth's total landmass. Yet on that tiny fraction of global real estate, it supports a staggering 17.5% of the entire world's population. The sheer pressure on this land and the resources it literally has to pump out every single day is just immense.
And this massive population is contained within some pretty dramatic borders, shaped by both history and geography. Now, you might naturally assume the longest border is with China or Pakistan, right? Actually, it's the roughly 4,000-kilometer stretch with Bangladesh. You've also got these famous historical divides, like the Radcliffe Line with Pakistan and the McMahon Line with China. Geographically, the whole thing stretches from Indarya Col up in the frosty heights of Ladakh all the way down to Indarya Point in the remote Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And if you've ever wondered how 1 billion people managed to set their watches together, it comes down to the 82 degrees 30 minutes east longitude line passing near Mirzapur. It's the ultimate timekeeper. And fascinatingly, it intersects with the Tropic of Cancer right in the state of Chhattisgarh.
All right, moving right into Section 2, the anatomy. We're talking mountains, plateaus, and coasts.
There is this intense, dramatic clash of geological time happening right across the subcontinent. On one hand, up north, you have the Himalayas. This is the absolute youth of the geological world. Born from a violent, ongoing collision between the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates, these young fold mountains are literally still growing today. They stretch across 3 massive parallel arcs, the towering Himadri, the middle Himachal, and the lower Shawalik. But if you travel down south, the Peninsular Plateau and the Aravalli Range are the exact opposite. They represent extreme old age. These are ancient, highly stable remnants of the supercontinent Gondwana, made of really old igneous and metamorphic rocks. The Aravallis are actually so unbelievably old, they've just been worn down to eroded residual hills.
Now, because of those young, ever-growing Himalayas, India basically sits near the roof of the world. But let's clear up a common mix-up about the highest peaks. Mount Everest is the undisputed global king, for sure, but it actually sits on the Nepal-China border. Then you have K2, the second highest globally, located in the Karakoram Range, but that's in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, making it disputed territory. So if we are talking about the highest undisputed peak located squarely on the Indian border, that heavyweight crown goes to Kanchenjunga at 8,598 meters, straddling Sikkim and Nepal.
So as we move south from those icy peaks, we hit the Deccan Plateau. Millions of years ago, massive volcanic eruptions totally blanketed this area in lava, creating what we call the Deccan Traps. Over eons, that cooling lava slowly broke down into something called regur, a super deep, highly fertile black soil. It holds moisture brilliantly, which makes it the absolute perfect canvas for growing cotton today. It's a crazy reminder of how ancient, violent geology translates directly into modern agricultural wealth.
Framing this whole massive landmass is over 7,500 kilometers of coastline, and it hides some completely distinct worlds. The eastern coast is super wide, built up by massive river deltas, while the western coast is narrow and jagged. And off these coasts, the diversity is just staggering. Over in the Bay of Bengal, you have the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a sprawling chain of 572 islands that are essentially just the submerged peaks of ancient volcanic mountains. Contrast that with Lakshadweep over in the Arabian Sea, which is just 36 tiny, flat islands built entirely by living coral atolls.
Which brings us to Section 3, the veins, the rivers, valleys, and lakes. Honestly, no river defines India quite like the Ganga. It traces a breathtaking over 2,500-kilometer journey, and the wild part? It doesn't even start out being called the Ganga. It's born way up high in the Gangotri Glacier as the Bhagirathi. It is only when it aggressively crashes into the Alaknanda River at Dev-Prayag that it officially becomes the Ganga. From there, it spills out of the mountains at Haridwar, wanders across the vast flat plains feeding millions of people, and eventually crosses into Bangladesh as the Padma. It finally joins the Meghna and ends its life by fanning out into the massive Sundarbans, literally the largest river delta on Earth, famous for its dense mangroves and, of course, the Royal Bengal tigers.
But that wild, year-round flow, that's really only half the story. Down south, the peninsular rivers are an entirely different beast. While those northern Himalayan rivers are snow-fed, perennial, and notorious for shifting their courses, like the devastating Kosi, often called the Sorrow of Bihar, the southern rivers rely heavily on the monsoon rains. They are seasonal, and they flow through very hard, ancient, fixed paths. And while most of them flow east, there is a totally fascinating exception. The Narmada and Tapi rivers actually flow west. They move completely backwards compared to the rest, cutting deep through tectonic rift valleys and dumping into the sea as estuaries rather than fanning out into deltas.
And speaking of water, this geography is just packed with absolute marvels. Okay, prepare to have your mind blown. In Manipur's Loktak Lake, over in the northeast, you have something called Fundis. These are massive, totally floating islands made of vegetation and soil. And they aren't just little patches of grass. They are so large and sturdy that they actually make up the Cable Lamjau National Park. That's right, it is literally the only floating national park in the entire world.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, the pulse, the monsoon system.
The Indian monsoon is literally an extreme distributor of life. Talk about extremes. In the northeast, Mawsynram in Meghalaya just gets battered with over 11,000 millimeters of rain a year, making it the undisputed wettest place on Earth. Yet in that exact same country, the high-altitude region of Leh and Ladakh and the deep western pockets of Rajasthan scrape by with less than 100 millimeters a year. Because mountain ranges like the Aravallis totally fail to block the moist winds, parts of Rajasthan are left as a bone-dry, rain-shadowed desert.
But you know, this pulse isn't just about the famous summer monsoon. During the freezing winter months, something incredible happens. Storm systems that originate thousands of miles away in the Mediterranean Sea travel all the way across the Middle East just to hit northwest India. These are known as western disturbances, and they drop absolutely crucial winter rainfall and snow. It's a stunning display of global interconnectedness. Without these distant Mediterranean storms, the vital winter rabi crops, like the wheat grown in Punjab and Haryana, would simply struggle to survive.
All right, on to Section 5, the living canvas, soils, forests, and tribes.
India's human tapestry is deeply, almost unbelievably tied to this extreme geography. About 8.6% of the population belongs to tribal communities, groups like the Bhils, Gonds, and Santhals. But how they've adapted to this land is what's truly fascinating. High up in the freezing, oxygen-thin deserts of Ladakh, the nomadic Changba people herd the specific goats that produce world-renowned pashmina wool. Across the Himalayas, the Bhotia migrate seasonally, moving up and down the steep mountainsides. And then, far out in the Andaman Islands, shielded by deep ocean and unbelievably dense forest, live the Sentinelese. They remain one of the most isolated, uncontacted groups of humans left anywhere on Earth.
And just like the people, the wildly fluctuating rainfall directly paints the physical landscape, dictating exactly what can grow where. Those drenching rains we talked about, they create towering tropical evergreens that literally never fade. Meanwhile, moderate zones force teak and sal trees into being deciduous, strategically dropping their leaves just to survive the dry spells. Out in the harsh deserts, thorny scrubs take over, featuring highly resilient lifelines like the kedri tree in Rajasthan. Down on the coastlines, mangroves use these strange, stilt-like roots to survive in salty mud, acting as a massive natural shield to protect the mainland from devastating cyclones.
Finally, we reach Section 6, Mastering the Land, Resources, Irrigation, and the Future.
So, to tame that wildly uneven pulse of the monsoon, India had to turn to some pretty massive engineering.
Post-independence, the country built these giant, multi-purpose projects which were famously dubbed the temples of modern India. By throwing massive concrete structures across wild rivers like the Bhakra Nangal on the Satluj River or the Hirakud on the Mahanadi, which actually holds the record as India's longest dam, the country manages to generate hydroelectric power and control devastating floods. They've even sent irrigation canals straight out into drylands, literally turning parts of the Rajasthan desert green.
But that brings us to a really critical crossroads. As we've seen today, India is an incredibly complex, living system, but it is not static. Today, Himalayan glaciers are melting at an unprecedented rate, and that predictable pulse of the monsoon we rely on, it's shifting, becoming dangerously erratic. So the ultimate question we have to leave you with today is this. As a booming nation demands more water, more food, and more power, how do we balance this massive scale of development with the very survival of the living, breathing subcontinent we just explored? It's a delicate, high-stakes balance, and the future of over 1 billion people depends entirely on getting it right. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity to learn even more about the incredible geography right beneath our feet.